Life Audio.
I feel overweight. I don't feel good. I'm not sleeping good. I just want to be left alone. And that's no way to live.
Hello and welcome to the Encourager Podcast, where we have encouraging conversations to help you joyfully harmonize your home and work life. I'm your host, Rebecca Scott. I'm a wife, mother, designer, coach, and author. I'm here to help encourage and empower you to confidently make decisions that work for you and your stage of life, whatever that might be. Hello, Encouragers. On today's podcast, I'm really excited because we're going to pretend that we are students in a classroom, but it's like a private classroom that nobody else knows that we're there, and we get to ask all of the questions that I know that we all have, especially as being fed to us in our feeds. So we're going to talk about hormones today. And I led up to that to really think like, guys, it's just like a private session. So wherever you're listening to, just pretend you're in this classroom. And I'm the super obnoxious one in the group who's like, I'm going to ask again. So if I don't understand you guys, I will say like, Lauren, you got to tell me again. I don't understand. I will be that student. You just whisper your questions to me. So I'm hoping I get all the questions that come to me. Our guest today is Dr. Skattum, and she is a gynecologist, and she is duly boarded in both OB GYN and also lifestyle medicine. Is that how you say it?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. She's a wife and she's a mother, and she is now a new friend that is somewhat local to where I am. And I couldn't wait to get her on the podcast because the introduction that I had to you at this event was like, oh yeah, she helps with hormones. And I was like, oh, I was already the student with my hand up where I'm like, I think she's friendly enough to answer all my questions. So welcome to the podcast, Lauren.
I'm so excited to be here. And I am super friendly. I'll answer all the questions.
Okay. Even the embarrassing ones, everybody like, and
those
I'm
are my
hoping you
favorites.
guys use our Facebook and our Instagram this week to ask the questions, because we will be reaching out to Lauren with like, oh, we couldn't answer this one in the podcast, but we have this because Lauren is one to answer it for us. So why did you decide to be duly boarded? As if being one doctor isn't enough. Why did you decide to get two of them?
So it's very interesting. I started my own practice after kind of my own health journey. I originally moved to South Dakota from Florida, and I had two kiddos when I was in Florida practicing there. And I had this like epiphany one day that I was eating a lot of dinosaur chicken nuggets, and I felt awful. And I couldn't understand why I felt so bad all the time. Granted, I had two small kids. I worked in a very stressful, high-paced job, but I felt like there was something more to that. And so I went through this whole journey with like my diet and really starting to prioritize myself and work through those things. And I realized that so much of our life comes from our nutritional choices, our exercise routines, how much sleep we get, which I was definitely lacking in, how much stress we carry, and, how much alcohol we drink and who's there to support us. And so much of our lives come down to just the basics. And that we in medicine, as a traditionally trained physician, we don't get a lot of those insider tracks of, we learn about medications and how they work and the pathology and, why you got to where you are, but never more of the preventative part of healthcare. We have a very good sick care system in the United States, but not a healthcare system. And so I realized that like, if I didn't know these things as a boarded physician, and got very little training, like how on earth was anybody else going to know these things? And so I didn't want to just be like, oh, okay, well, you should eat better. I think the how are you going to incorporate that is so important, because in the end, like we know that we should eat more fruits and vegetables, and we should get more sleep, and we should get more exercise. But if you're going to tell a busy mom, in this case, me, who had two small children, a husband who worked crazy hours, and myself who had crazy hours, and then a terrible commute in Orlando traffic, how becomes very important. Like, okay, well, you should do this, but how the heck are you going to start? And so that was my why.
I love your statement about we are a sick care, not a health care.
It's true.
And that, you set out to kind of solve your own problem. Like, I wonder if these dinosaur nuggets are not cutting it.
The dinosaur chicken nuggets were not cutting it.
Right. Okay, so I know that you're expert. I mean, you actually have several expertise, because anybody that I've met that said I get to have Dr. Lauren on the podcast, they're like, oh my gosh, did you know she's an expert? And I'm like, oh gosh, there's all kinds of things we could talk about. But in particular, because this has been being fed to me nonstop in my Instagram feed in particular. So I must have rested on it long enough for it to think I need help with it. And I do. So that's why we have Dr. Lauren on. You have been specializing in hormone balancing for quite some time as well. Can you tell us a little bit about, okay, so let's say the feed is telling me that it's important, but I'm like, but I don't know what it will solve. So I don't know even where to start. Can you tell us like where we should start or why it's important?
I sure can. That is kind of a long answer though. So hormones are another one of those things that we don't get a lot of training on in medicine. And so even though I am a boarded OB GYN, most of our training centers on the OB part or the obstetrics. And so much of our worth is focused on when we are having kids and how we're going to get to the point of having kids. And then after kids, we kind of just get forgotten by the healthcare system. And so, like the OB GYN's emphasis is on the babies. And then afterwards, you're like, you have all these, changes that happen. And especially as women are having children later in life, those perimenopausal symptoms really start relatively soon after having kids. I didn't have my first child until I was 30. And so, they were very close together, but, things happen. And then with that big change, you can start getting, hot flashes. You can get night sweats. Your sleep is interrupted. You may not, you love your husband, but like, you don't like the fact that he's like just over there breathing because it's like irritating. Or your libido and your desire for kind of that close relationship is like, I mean, take it or leave it kind of thing. And all of those things really start to impact, who you are and how your relationship functions. And then that impacts your family. And then as those families are impacted, that impacts a greater community. And so really having women take a hold of their own health makes such a big difference, because it becomes a generational impact at that point.
When does perimenopausal start? I'm sure you're not going to say an exact age, but
so it's different for everybody. So menopause is considered 12 months without a cycle. So you stop having a period. You can have surgical menopause because you've had organs removed, or you can have a natural menopause. The average age of menopause in the United States is 51, but anything after 40 is considered normal. There's women who go through menopause in their 60s, and there's people who go to menopause in their 40s that are just a normal cycle. A lot of times that can be hereditary. So if your mom went through menopause early, you will probably go through menopause early. Not that anybody should be smoking these days, but if you're a smoker, those people tend to go through menopause sooner. And so perimenopause is the time that surrounds that. You have two very important hormones in your body, both estrogen as well as testosterone, that your ovaries make. Everybody tends to know about the estrogen part. That's the one that's the hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings, sleep. I always joke that estrogen makes the world just a bright and shining, beautiful place. And that is usually the last one to go. Your periods can get irregular, things like that. But testosterone, and that one usually you can feel anywhere up to like 8 to 5 years before you actually stop having a cycle and your ovaries stop working completely. Testosterone, though, is kind of a sneaky one. It seems that we feel the effects of the testosterone way before we feel the effects even of, or the magnitude of the estrogen loss. And we don't really have a time frame on that one. In my practice, I definitely see it happening much further out from menopause. So like anybody in their mid 30s on can really have an impact, can be impacted by a testosterone level. And that's the libido, lean muscle mass, that kind of weird belly pooch that like you tend to get in menopause, weight gain, what I call mental agility, because as women, we're always trying to do a lot of things at one time. And so I joke that my example is a self example again, is that I love to cook. Food is my love language. And so like I'll be making something and I need something from the pantry, but somebody calls me. And so I'm on the phone. I go to the pantry. I look at the pantry. I was like, I have no idea why I'm here. You're still on the phone. So then you go back to your, your recipe or whatever. And you try and figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And again, like you're just like, it's gone. So you have to like finish your phone call so that you can look at the recipe, so that you can go to the pantry to then go back to your life of what you were doing. And testosterone is what helps with that like quick transition of you're like, okay, yeah, this is what we're doing. This is how we roll.
Okay, I thought the testosterone, you were going to say that it actually makes us slower and things don't compute as fast, but she didn't.
No.
No, it's not that one. Okay, so I've been saying this for myself personally, like just over the last couple of years, I'll be like, I don't know what's going on with me, but I feel like maybe I'm on the verge of a stroke, only because I would do exact scenario that you were doing. So I'm like, why are the words not coming to me as quickly as they used to? Or why am I stuck in the basement looking at the fridge? And I know I came down here for something, so now I got to go back up the stairs to the recipe book to figure out what it is. So that is a sign of menopause or a sign that my hormones are not balanced.
It can be both. It kind of just depends. It can also be a sign that like your diet is crap and that you aren't, nutritionally like feeding yourself. It's incredible to me so that hormones are life changing for people who need them. But if you're eating, donut holes for breakfast every morning and, not really taking care of yourself, then it doesn't matter how many drugs I give you at all. So there's better living through chemistry, but that also starts with better living. So you have to do both. And there are some people who don't need hormones. They just need to, kind of figure out how to implement those life-changing strategies. And there's not really a quick answer for that. I would say that, just being aware of your body and, the kind of things that you're going through, and then, finding a physician who is able to talk to you about it and has time to talk to you about it.
Okay, so now we got to talk about that. Let's say we have the listeners that are like, yep, that's relatable and that's relatable. But I do love that you're giving permission that sometimes the preventative care, which we talked about in our pre-interview, so let's talk about that a little bit, is it's not necessarily that you're going to prescribe hormones. It might just be some diet changes that we need to make or some lifestyle changes.
Absolutely. Stress management, anything.
Okay, so what are like the top whatever amount of changes that we could make, both diet and drink, that would help us function a little bit better? And then let's talk about, if that's not cutting it, what kind of hormones do you prescribe? Which I know is way too big of a question for you to be like, I don't know, I have to study the patient individually, but do your best, Lauren.
So universally, we should all drink more water. We're basically very dehydrated at baseline. So you should be drinking like half your body weight in ounces of water.
Oh, thank the Lord. If you're going to say all of our body weight, I'm just like, I'm not drinking a gallon of water a day. I can't do it.
Nope. And actually too much water is equally as big of a problem. So don't drink too much. Don't drink too little. It should be Goldilocks. It should be just right. Fiber is the most underutilized nutrient in the United States. And there's two different types of fiber. There's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber is what you like mix into like Metamucil or, something like that, which is great. It helps you poop, but it doesn't necessarily like feed your gut and really help with the detox process. and, inflammation. It doesn't do anything for that. It's good. You need it. It just, most of the good stuff comes from fruits and vegetables and, unprocessed grains. And so that would be like my one nutritional thing, and water. Guidelines for exercise, or you should be getting 150 minutes a week of, zone 2 cardio. So your heart rate should be up. It should be, 80% max effort, and you can do it in 10-minute spurts. If that's what you have, you can do it as a weekend warrior. You're more prone to injury that way, but you're getting your 150 minutes in. And so that movement in general is very important. I think that sitting is like the new smoking. So making sure that you're active and, moving throughout the day, but that specific time, there's actually a study that I just learned about earlier this month that says that even if you're active and you have like an active job, that there's still benefit of a dedicated exercise time. So you have to prioritize that time. And then, not drinking too much. There's actually no benefit of alcohol. Don't smoke, wear your seatbelt, even kind of little things like that. Sunscreen, huge.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the alcohol. So you didn't say permission for, you didn't tell us either or, but there is a trend for just being sober nonstop. Why is that? What?
Alcohol is a known carcinogen. And so, that doesn't keep us from drinking it, but there's no health benefit to alcohol. Even the nitrates in red wine, which most people, when we have this conversation, it's like, but, isn't this a thing? I was like, yes, but if you want the health benefit, you'd be better off like just eating the grapes. So,
wow, look at that.
So that's not to say that, I was a bartender in college. I also love to cook. So like, I love mixing cocktails. I love a good cocktail, but especially the older we get, it becomes more detrimental, and the impact of that, like one cocktail, again, this is just, another me story, is that it becomes so not worth it, because now it impacts my sleep. I'm so dehydrated, and it ruins the next day. I was like, I got stuff to do,
That's the biggest thing for me with alcohol is I've never been a big drinker, and I actually chose a year of sobriety this year. I'm just going to do the whole year with no alcohol. And I don't have enough to tell you guys anymore, other than it hasn't been difficult. But I don't have anything profound to say about it yet, other than I always do the question, like, I don't have room for delay. I don't know a single woman that's running the same amount of roles and stages of life that I am, that they can afford the delay either. I'm like, no, I'm already feeling like I'm not always firing on all cylinders. I do not need another agent let's leave behind, because I'm positive, I'll miss something significant, whether it's just the kids' actual like emotional needs that I just missed because I wasn't in the mood to like, or physically was like, I don't think I can meet this need right now. So I'll share more as I learn more throughout the year about what it's meant. But it's interesting you should say that it is a carcinogen.
It is a known carcinogen. Yeah.
God, I did not know that. Okay, so let's say we start exercising. We start drinking more water. We drink less. We'll just say that much. You drink less. You're getting the good fiber. And we're still like, I'm not firing all cylinders. Then what do you do?
You come and see me.
Because individually, every person is going to have an individual plan, I assume, when you start asking more about their lifestyle, which is why you got certified both in the lifestyle as well, because you're very much about preventative care before you have to do surgeries and medications and all that, correct?
Correct. But even with all that, like, menopause is like death and taxes. It's going to come for every one of us at some point. And so, there are people who, like my mom, who had, like one hot flash, and they're like, oh, that was terrible. And then that was menopause. And then I know she's so lucky. I really hope I get hers. I don't think so. And there's other, I've had other patients who've had like 17 hot flashes a day until their 80s. And inevitably what happens, because we're women and we're tough, and, we're used to dealing with inconvenience, with a period cycle every month, is we suck it up. And inevitably, it's about 5 to 10 years of sucking it up before you realize, like, I am literally just surviving. I am not thriving. I am like, I'm getting it done, but I'm not happy. And you have worked so hard. Your kids are good. They're at school, out of the house, whatever. This should be the time that you really enjoy your husband. That statistically in careers, we've we're like doing well. We've gotten to the top of like wherever we're going to be. We should have time to travel. And you're like, I don't feel good. I don't really, want to make out with my husband. I don't want to go anywhere. I feel overweight. I don't feel good. I'm not sleeping good. I just want to be left alone. And that's no way to live. And so when you talk about hormones, the three most important things are timing, route, and dosing. And so the mantra with hormones is you do the lowest dose for the shortest amount of time to deal with the symptoms you have. There are people out there who are on it for the rest of their life, and that is okay. There are people who need, like a 5-year window, and then they're like, I don't know that I really need this anymore. I'm going to try it without it. Cool. Sometimes you don't need it anymore. Sometimes you do. But then the timing becomes very important, is that I always explain menopause in terms of like a light switch. So when the lights are on, your hormones are, your ovaries are doing fine. They're doing what they're supposed to do. You have a cycle every month, blah, blah, blah. When the lights are off, that's menopause. Like, you got nothing left. But that interim period is like the lights are flickering. And so you might have a slow flicker. You might have a really fast flicker, and you're like, oh my God, what is happening? It kind of just depends. But hormones stabilize that flicker. And where you get into problems is that suck it up time, where the lights have been off, or they're doing like a really fast flicker and you just don't know what's going on. And that suck it up time, and the lights are off, and your hormones are all quiet, and those receptors are all quiet. And then you decide to add hormones. And then all of a sudden the lights go back on. And all of those, that risk for cancer or the bad things that people are concerned about with hormones, that's when your risk is really elevated, is because your body hasn't seen those hormones in a long time. And now all of a sudden the lights are on, it's a party. Whereas if you just stabilize them during the flicker, especially if you're using bioidentical hormones, which is the closest thing that your body actually makes to your natural hormones that you're, from your ovaries, it just stabilizes the light switch. And the lights are just on.
Okay, so several takeaways here, because that was one of my questions too, is like, depending on what you're reading, they're like, oh, hormones will give you cancer. Like, you can't do hormone replacement therapy. But what you just described too is like, we have to do the reverse as women, which, like you said, we're not used to. We're just like, go, 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 or take the inconvenience. When it starts to feel incongruent or like, gosh, this isn't quite right, that's actually the time when we need to meet with a gynecologist, especially with you, to go like, okay, where are we at? Instead of then brightly turning on all the lights, which I'm assuming you wouldn't do with a patient because you know of the bad effects of it. But so in the middle, guys, not at the end, not when it's really, really bad. I think it's always good. I wouldn't say not at the beginning, but remember, in the middle, when you're still just staying a little off, that's actually the time to start figuring out what's going on.
The best thing to do too is, like, if you don't need anything yet, get a baseline level. Figure out where it is that you're doing good at, or if things are starting, to feel off, go get a baseline. And then that way, when you, in a year or 6 months or, whatever it happens to be, where things really start to tank, if you wake up one day and you're like, I don't know that I can do this anymore, that survival, and, you're not living, you're just like surviving. Before you get to that point is really when you should try and implement something. But if you go, you get on board, you get some testing done, then when when you get to that point, then you already have some information to go on. And information, I don't think you can ever have enough information.
Well, especially about, like you said, as volatile or as massive as each individual can be, you're going to need a lot of information. What is the baseline testing? Like, is it a blood draw, or tell me like what the testing looks like?
So there's lots of different testing options. The gold standard of testing, which is the one that I use, is a serum blood test. I know there's salivary testing out there, there's urinary testing. I don't use those. I use the blood test.
And you guys can't tell this, but she's rolling her eyes. So why don't you use those?
I don't think they're reliable, and and really that's what it comes down to. I just don't think that they're great tests. So that if you have
And
the
serum
option,
means what? You literally draw blood out.
yeah, exactly.
So on the feed, then they're like, hey, just take this test and we'll figure out what you need. Is that valid? Is that like a cheater test?
That's the cheater test. And so you can
Okay.
get some information on that. Like, so if your hormones are completely gone, then that one's kind of an obvious one. But especially if you're going to go to somebody who is going to help with the process of this, I recommend blood work. For us, we'll do baseline blood levels. And then if we do hormones, then I like the bioidentical hormone pellets. And we can talk more about that. But we insert them. They go underneath the skin of your butt. They do not go in your butt, as I have had a patient very prepared for.
Good clarification, everyone.
It is very important difference. But they go underneath the skin, like where your panty line is, and then they just basically dissolve. They're the size of a grain of rice, and they dissolve in the adipose, or the fat tissue of your butt, and you metabolize through them. And you feel something in about 10 to 14 days. Full effect is like a month to 6 weeks, where we check your labs. And then they usually last anywhere between 12 and 16 weeks. And then we check your labs again. So we know how long, how much we gave you, how high you get, how long they last. And then from there, we kind of just rinse and repeat. Because once you understand it's not a cookbook. Everybody's so different, which is, I have a graph of like literally everybody's labs and where they're associated in the timeline and what I gave them, so that at any point in time, I can go back and reference as like, okay, well, I felt good, but maybe I didn't feel my best, or this was the time frame that I felt really good. How can we do it? Just, it's all about optimization. And so sometimes the more data points you have until you get it right, then the better off you are. And that's really hard to do without a blood test.
Yes. Okay. So we heard that. I mean, it's like you can gain a little bit of information if you took one, but you're still going to need a lot more information to like really make good choices. I knew our butts were for something, God. Thank you. We just put it in our butts metabolize. I don't think that phrase put together here. Tell us about pellet. What is that?
So pellets are a bioidentical hormone that is compounded in FDA regulated pharmacies. And so kind of going back to those three important things in terms of route, there's pills, there's patches, there's creams, there's shots, and then there's pellets. I don't love the creams. I know a lot of people do. They are also compounded, but a lot of times they're not compounded in an FDA regulated lab. And so what you get isn't what you always get every single time. I don't think there's a problem with compounded creams for other things, but when you're talking about hormones and you want to be very specific about that safety margin that you talked about, I think it's important to have an FDA regulated dosing protocol. The patches are good, but they're only estrogen. So you want something that is transdermal or transcutaneous, so it doesn't go oral, it's not taken orally, because estrogen, that way you can avoid the first pass metabolism of the liver if you don't take it from an oral route. And that's important from like a blood clot standpoint, or some of those other side effects that you want to avoid, clots being the big one. And so when you talk about a FDA pharmaceutical product that is a prescription, that is not a bad choice, but it is different than the estrogen or progesterone or testosterone that you make in your body. And that's because what drug companies do is they take the chemical structure of estrogen or progesterone, and they stick things onto it, hydroxy groups or methyl groups or whatever, to make it a new estrogen or a new progesterone. And they don't do it with testosterone because you can't get it in the US for women, but they will do that so that they can patent it, which then makes it a new product, which means that they can market it at a much higher cost because now it's new and it's patented.
I knew there was something in this. Okay, thank you for laying that out and being brave enough to say that. Then another question about why testosterone for women in the U.S. Imagine that. We can't get it, so we'll come back to that. But tell us what bioidentical means. It's producing the same hormones that Becca's hormones create?
Yep, so it's just the same, like estrogen as the chemical structure is just estrogen as the chemical structure. It is not obviously endogenous or the hormones that you make in your body, but it is the closest thing to that natural chemical structure that we have. So your body reacts differently to it because it sees it as itself. It doesn't see it that it's this, but it has all these different things on it. Like if you show up and you have a mask on, you're like, well, I think that's Rebecca, but I can't tell.
So what does happen if we take the one that has all the added things on it that's brand new?
Sometimes nothing. Sometimes you feel better and that's a perfectly okay thing.
That's nerve-wracking though.
I'm all about optimization. So if you can do something, but do it, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it better. You should do it as well as you possibly can.
Yeah, especially if you're spending the time and the money to figure all of this out. Okay, so why can't we do testosterone for women in the U.S.?
Well, it's actually not available for women. And I think that my non-medical but personal thoughts on that is that a lot of the pharmaceutical industry and insurance doesn't cover hormones typically, especially after the age of 65, is that there are a lot of men in those power positions, and funding for research for women's health is increasing for sure, but has historically not really been there. I mean, it makes sense. Like if your body naturally makes it and then you lose it, like you replace it to feel better. This isn't like it's not rocket science. But if you don't have funding, if you don't have a lot of regulations, if you don't have that backing by people who say that it's powerful, who that say it's important in power positions, then you don't have marketable products.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so is it safe to say that I think you just had a really valid point in the middle of the podcast too, where you're like, well, they don't really care about us after you have a baby. And like I had postpartum with all of mine, but then recovered-ish, I think, and so then you like, okay, well now I'm concentrating on the well baby checks and the physical forms for them to be able to play sports. And you're like, wait, when is the last time I went in? But you're like, I feel fine. It's all good. Those are actually the times when we need to be being with you and treat it as if this transition after even your last child it's not the right term. So I'm sure the medical bone in you is like, Becca, that's the total wrong term, but it's like a puberty stage where we paid big attention to that at that age. Cause we're like, well, what is happening now? We should have those same kind of feelings and questions in our 30s and 40s is like, wait a minute, what is happening now? This is not okay. Or this is not quite normal for me.
Well, and I think that's a beautiful point too, is that, depending on what age you are when you have your kids, is that as your hormones are going down, your teenagers' hormones are going up. And so that shift is, further amplified by the fact that you don't have any anymore. So especially if you're dealing with, teenage daughters who all of a sudden have lots of hormones, it can make those feelings like so much worse too.
Yeah, I think if I just hugged my son, I could have like hormonal transfer or something.
Just breathe the same air.
Osmosis process here, Lauren. Can't you study that? Okay, well, this has been super informative. I think we're going to have to second one after everybody tunes in and is like, wait, you forgot to add this. So I'm looking forward to what the questions are after this. But in the meanwhile, you guys, I would suggest from my point of view, and I'll ask Lauren here as well, start asking, okay, do I feel okay? Like, do I really feel like at my optimal physical self, mental self, spiritual self. Ask yourself, like, hey, your thing's firing. Your spouse is a good indicator if you can find a tender moment to be like, does this not feel like me? And hopefully they'll be tender about it. Pray about it before you ask those questions, because it can be tender. But they're a good indicator of like, yeah, I don't think you're firing on all cylinders. That's what I say. And I would say that, like, I don't think I'm firing on all cylinders. And so we always end the podcast, Lauren, with saying, how can you encourage our encouragers?
I would encourage you that you're worth taking care of. And as you take care of everybody else, like, somebody should be there to take care of you. And there are great doctors, all around the country, in Sioux Falls, where I came from, in Florida. There's great doctors everywhere. So I would just find somebody who has time to listen to you and learn your story, learn exactly what you need individually, and then helps you take care of you.
Yes, I think the emphasis there, and especially if you go to see Dr. Lauren, is the time spent. It should not be treated like a business transaction. However, I know they're running businesses where you're in and out in 20 minutes. This is a longer conversation than that. So if you don't feel like you can share with your doctor, you don't feel like they're listening, it's full permission to try another one.
You're worth taking care of.
Yes, I love that. You are worth taking care of. What a positive note to end on. Okay, encouragers, use our communities. What other questions do we have for Dr. Lauren? We'll have her back on for episode number 2. Thank you so much, Lauren, for being a part of the podcast today. Until next time, encouragers, we got this because he's got us. Thanks so much for tuning in. If the Encourager podcast has helped or encouraged you in any way, please subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review. And then help us spread the message of encouragement and hope by sharing the podcast with others. Ready to bring more organization and joy into your life? The Encourager Academy helps you harmonize your home and work life through our online course and coaching programs. Our 5-system approach, me, food, family, work, and home, tackles your biggest obstacles, offering lifetime access to video lessons and guided worksheets. Learn at your own pace with practical tools and strategies. Enroll now at encourageracademy.com and use code WeGotThis for $50 off. Are you ready for clarity and purposeful progress without the overwhelm? Join the Clarity Blueprint membership community. Transform your life with like-minded women, taking small, meaningful steps twice a month. Access monthly calls, worksheets, videos, guest speakers, and a supportive community with a very affordable price. Say goodbye to chaos and hello to purposeful progress. Visit theencouragerpodcast.com and join today.
Has fear stolen your peace? I'm Jennifer Slattery, lead host of the Faith Over Fear podcast, helping you fight your fears and grow your faith. Subscribe at lifeaudio.com.